Hi, I'm your host, Ray Dogum, and welcome to VibeCast. VibeCast is VibeBio's very own podcast where we explore some of the hottest topics in drug development, investment strategies, and technology innovation. Our guest today is Frank Gleeson, CEO of Satellos Bioscience, which was founded on breakthrough research identifying and defining a subpopulation of muscle stem cells capable of self-renewal and regeneration. Satellos is building on this research to try and develop a small molecule treatment for Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy. So with that being said, Frank, I would love you to introduce yourself a little bit more to the community and explain to them how you came on this biotech journey. Today, Frank will share a bit about his company's strategic and scientific approach, as well as the company's plans for 2024. So with that being said, Frank, I would love you to introduce yourself a little bit more to the community and explain to them how you came on this biotech journey.
Well, super. I'm happy to do that. And Ray, it's a real pleasure to meet you. And thank you for the opportunity to be on VibeCast and speak to you about, well, myself and about Satellos. And Satellos is really a company I'm extraordinarily passionate about, as are all of us in the company. And how I got to be part of Satellos, I became very fascinated with the field of stem cells, in particular, the potential of stem cells to be modulated. This has been an interest of mine scientifically and therapeutically for over 20 years now. I've been past chairman of the board of the Stem Cell Network of Canada, where I'm based, a body that funds research in Canada. And my co-founder and scientific colleague in Satellos, Dr. Michael Rudnicki, is the scientific director of that network and has been for all the years that I've known him, which goes back to 2003. And together, we have now created two companies in our time working together, Satellos being the second company. And what's fascinating about Satellos and why we believe it's so important is that Michael has made a discovery relevant to a disease called Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy that we believe has the potential to lead to disease-modifying treatment for this disease. Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy is a fatal genetic disease that largely affects boys because of the genetic nature and the inheritance pattern of the disease. And it is a cruel disease in that it is not only fatal, but it robs these young people progressively through their life of their skeletal muscle and their ability to carry out the most basic functions, such as brushing their own teeth or wiping their brow. And it's cruel on the patients who live with the disease, and it's cruel on the families who have to live and see what's happening to their child or to their brother. It's really quite horrifying all the way around. And there's very little for these children that changes the course of the disease. The best treatments are able to help them stay ambulatory a little bit longer in life, which is significant, and to prolong their lives a little bit longer. However, the fate they face is the same. And so what we are working on is a way, we believe, to help them regain some of their muscle function. So my colleague, Dr. Rudnicki, discovered that in this disease, there is a failure of regeneration that would occur normally to those of us who don't live with Duchenne muscular disease. Our skeletal muscle repairs itself and recovers and actually regenerates. In fact, skeletal muscle is the most regenerative organ in the human body. But for these children, what we discovered is that their skeletal muscle is not regenerating properly. And it's not regenerating properly because of the genetic nature of the disease. But the aspect that is broken had not been known before my colleagues' discoveries. And what we've discovered is that the same protein that's damaged or absent in this disease, called dystrophin, is required by the body to enable the process of muscle repair and regeneration. And it's required in what are called muscle stem cells. So throughout our lives, our bodies have a reservoir of muscle stem cells. And these muscle stem cells continue to turn over. They continue to divide. They continue to replenish themselves. And when our muscles are injured or when we deliberately injure our muscles by high performance training, or where we're in an accident or what have you, these stem cells then are programmed to create new muscle cells. So when they divide to create a muscle progenitor cell, which goes on to form muscle. And without the dystrophin protein, they're unable to do that very efficiently. So we believe we've uncovered a previously unknown cause of the progressive damage that these young children experience progressively and continuously throughout their lives. And so what we've then worked on, and we believe this will be a first really in medical science, what we've worked on is to identify ways to trigger these stem cells to divide properly. So we're not attempting to put anything into the human body. We're not doing gene therapy. We're not doing cell therapy. We're taking a different approach, and we're saying this protein that's missing plays a signaling role. It's required to deliver a signal, like a wiring junction. It's required to deliver a signal that allows that wiring to continue. And so we've identified alternate ways to overcome the loss of this signal. We've identified other proteins that can be modulated. One in particular, a protein that we call AC1, or the community calls AC1. And this particular protein is a member of a family of proteins called kinases, which are well-known drug targets in the pharmaceutical industry. And so we've identified a specific kinase that when we modulate this kinase with a pill, a small molecule drug that would be taken in tablet form or as a capsule, that we can reset the body's ability to restore, repair, and regeneration of skeletal muscle. And this would be groundbreaking. There's never been a treatment developed that restores the ability of a human tissue to repair and regenerate itself. So it would be a first of its kind. And if it works, it would be life-changing for these children and adolescents who truly live who live very, very bravely with a very, very horrible disease condition. So that's probably a longer answer than you were looking for with your question.
No, I appreciate it. I think you answered a few questions I was going to ask, but I'm going to just lead with this. I think it's interesting. You mentioned, how terrible this disease is. Actually, most people who get it or have it, they don't live past 20 or 30 years old. So it is significantly, hinders quality of life as well as lifespan. Mm-hmm. So definitely a huge need for this sort of potential treatment. There is no cure for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, as you mentioned. So I think this sort of treatment sounds very promising, of course. And you sort of explained the role that stem cells play and how dystrophin plays, a really important healing in the healing process for muscle generation. How did you, in the research, how did they discover dystrophin, and how was this sort of research?
So my colleague has been studying muscle stem cells his entire academic career, going back to the mid-1990s in his days at the Whitehead Institute at MIT before he came back to Canada. And he's become a world authority on understanding how muscle stem cells function, what they are, how they work, what they do, and the regulatory processes that govern them. So Michael became interested about 15 years ago in particular in trying to kind of overlay this understanding of muscle stem cells and their role with disease situations to see if there was a linkage between known diseases and the role of muscle stem cells. And he became very interested for a variety of reasons in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And in studying this disease and in trying to understand the difference between muscle stem cells in a healthy animal and in an animal with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, there are models of these diseases. He saw a difference in how, in the Duchenne situation, it's called an MDX mouse. He saw a difference in how those mice responded to injury. They didn't regenerate new tissue as efficiently as did a normal or animal without this mutation in the dystrophin gene. And so by interrogating that further in a system that we in the company have brand named MyoRegenX, which is a way of looking at muscle fibers directly, he was able to isolate specifically in the muscle stem cells a difference between the population of Duchenne stem cells and a population of normal or healthy stem cells. And the biggest difference, in fact, the single difference, was that the dystrophin protein was absent in the muscle stem cells of a mouse with Duchenne. And so that was a huge clue that he was on to the problem. The problem being that the stem cells can't organize properly to divide properly. So the stem cells are there. They're attempting to divide. They're trying to become new muscle cells. That's their only role in life, is to divide and become new muscle cells, but they're failing in the process. And so that's when Michael contacted me and he said, Frank, I think we have an opportunity to work together again. I think there's something here that could be really very powerful as a future treatment for children with this disease. Now, that was almost 10 years ago that Michael contacted me. So we started this journey together on this specific project roughly 10 years ago. And we formed the company in 2018, which is 6 years ago. So we spent 3 or 4 years simply furthering the science and thinking about how we would go about trying to fix the problem we identified. And it's kind of the story of drug development and the story of science that these things do take a long time. The human body is very, very complex, but it requires not just the idea, it requires a real commitment to want to solve the problem you've identified. And so, we're now at the point where we've identified the problem, we've identified a way to address the problem, we've identified a particular kinase drug target that we can go after. We've invented a drug to go after that target. We've tested this in animal models. We've shown it has the potential to be effective in animal models in multiple different disease areas. And now we're very close to beginning human clinical trials. And so for us, this has been, as I said, a journey where we have great passion and a real commitment to try to get this to people. We've now had the chance to meet and spend time with families, with the boys with muscular dystrophy and their families. And we really want to do something for this population of individuals.
Absolutely. And I think the clinical trials will be very telling and important for that process. And it makes sense that it takes, over 6 to 10 years to kind of get a drug through approval process. Very typical in biotech. And that makes me think about all the thousands of different molecules and therapies that are currently being investigated that we'll see in the next 10 years or so, which really excites me. So it's really great to hear progress in the journey. Can you talk a little bit about the planning going on for the clinical trials currently?
Sure. So over the course of the development of the company, we've been very active, in fundraising. We have in aggregate raised about $75 million Canadian dollars. So that's about 60 million US. And we have much of that still in the bank. So we have roughly 2/3 of that in the bank that we are now using to move the company forward into clinical development. And so this is the most expensive part of the drug development journey. And tends to be also a very long part of the process. So this year we will conduct what are called phase 1 safety trials. So we will do our safety studies in volunteers, healthy volunteers who don't have Duchenne muscular dystrophy, but volunteer to be tested on molecules. We believe our drug will be very safe. We don't see any reason to suspect there'll be any issues. We haven't seen any untoward effects in any of the preclinical studies that we've done to date. And this will position us by the end of 2024 to begin clinical development in 2025 in Duchenne patients. And so our plan in 2025 is to begin those studies in Duchenne patients. And in those studies, we will attempt to show that also our drug is safe in this patient population, but more importantly, that this drug has the potential to alter the regeneration of muscle for these young people.
That's good to hear. Taking a step back, sort of looking at high level here, as a company, what are some of the inflection points you're currently navigating in addition to the clinical trials that are in development?
Yeah, it's a good question. As a company, as a biotech company develops and moves along in particular, the inflection points are kind of really step changes in the company. Some you can only see on the inside of the company, and some become more visible as you move along. So for us, the kinds of inflection points moving along now really are tied to the drug itself. So, inventing the drug, we all felt internally that's a huge inflection point. Inventing a drug is no small accomplishment. Showing that it's safe is a really big deal. And so that's the next big step for us to get that drug through the regulators into human beings, show that it's safe. That we think is a huge step forward, because now that gives us the flexibility to move into a population of patients who already have something that, is affecting them. So we don't want to make it worse. We don't want to make their life more difficult. We want to make their life less difficult. And so showing the drug is safe, of course, you need to do that, but also we believe that it will be safe, and that will be very helpful, because many of the treatments that these children need to take for their daily lives do have side effects, some of them quite serious side effects. So we hope to show that we have a drug that will be unlikely to have serious side effects. And we think that would be a big inflection point. And then moving further from there is, of course, the ongoing work that we do in different animal models, showing the potential of this to have an effect. And then once we move into patients in 2025, showing that proof of concept in humans that we can have a beneficial impact. So our objective is not only to slow the progression of Duchenne muscular dystrophy, but our objective goes beyond that, which is to show that we can improve their situation, that we can make their muscles stronger, that we can give them back some level of function, which would be game-changing, we believe, and it would be a huge benefit for all concerned.
Without speculating too much, do you think there are other indications that this platform or this specific small molecule perhaps might be indicated for?
Yes.
In the future?
Quite broadly, there could be many different areas. So within the world of diseases that are packaged together as dystrophies, there are roughly 30 different types of dystrophies that have been identified. So there are a number that may very well be amenable to a treatment with our molecule. One called FSHD, we just issued a press release last week of some experimental work we've done in a model of that disease that showed a beneficial impact. Could be other types of dystrophies down the road as well. In addition to that, there are a range of kind of disorders in which muscle weakens or muscle becomes damaged. There are all kinds of conditions that are unrelated to a genetic situation: simple muscle injury, trauma, surgery, sports injuries. All of these types of situations prompt a response in regeneration, and we believe that our approach could modulate that response. So we see broad potential both in individuals that have a pre-existing genetic situation or condition, as well as individuals that don't.
You mentioned that the company's raised already around $75 million, I think. Are you, and you still have about 2/3 of that in the bank. Are you currently looking for
Roughly
advanced, further funding at this time?
Well, biotech requires funding. So as you move along and as you move from one stage of development to the next, typically more funds are required. We don't have an immediate need for funding. The markets right now are are becoming more positive than they were. We've raised money in some very, very tough times. Those times you don't want to get too excited too fast, but things are looking better than they did over the last couple of years. We'll look at the markets opportunistically, but also our plan down the road is, to make sure that we have money before we need money. So it's important in biotech not to wait to the last minute to go and raise some more money. The market doesn't usually respond well to that, and investors, you're not in a favorable position at that point. So sometime over the next couple of years, we'll go back to the market.
I appreciate that answer. How is the biotech ecosystem and culture in Canada? As you mentioned, your company's based in Canada. How's it different from maybe the US?
Yeah, I think first off, there's an equivalence in education and science, quality of science, quality of people between the two countries. I mean, I think it's very homogenous in that way. The biggest single difference to me has two kind of flavors to it. One is a general risk-taking attitude. This isn't the area in which Canadians seem to be most comfortable to take risk. Canadians seem very comfortable to take risk in mining and oil and gas and other areas, but much less in the biotech space. So generally speaking, it's a little harder to get started in the Canadian setting. And the other thing is we're a much smaller country population-wise, and our overall pharma industry is significantly smaller. And so access to the very best management in large numbers is difficult. So in specific skill areas in the US, you can recruit and interview many tens of people for specific kind of roles, whereas in Canada, you simply don't have the pool to draw on. So it does create some challenges as you grow and as you need very specialized expertise. So this is one area where actually kind of COVID actually helped us a bit, because we were absolutely forced to work virtually. And we learned, all of us, it doesn't really matter where people are. So it's made it a lot easier for us to look south of the border, recruit people, and say, stay where you are. You don't have to come to Canada. You don't have to move from where you are. We'll figure out a way to make it work. And it's actually worked really well.
How big is the company now? Like how many employees, I guess, full-time?
Yeah, we're now at 20 employees. We're 20 people. This time last year, we were less than 10. So we've more than doubled in size in the last year as we've invented the drug and moved further and further along and needed to bring in these different skill sets as I've just described. And I see us being, in a 20 to 30 person level for the foreseeable future. We will be adding some people over the next year, but that will kind of be the envelope. We do a lot of work with contract research organizations, as many biotechs do.
That's for sure. That's a huge part of the market, I would say. What kind of partnerships is the company seeking, if any, now?
Yeah, so I always, believe that, talking to people is a good thing, and understanding the market, understanding what third parties might want to see is a good thing before, we form any too hard and fast kind of perspectives ourselves. So we're actively engaged in outreach, talking to pharma companies, talking to larger biotech companies. Our interests at this time are truly around raising awareness about our company, generating interest for the future in our company. Not so much for today, although you never know. You never know what might come along. We're on a pretty clear mission to get our drug in our hands into Duchenne patients, demonstrate that it has some benefit, hopefully significant benefit, before we get too involved in partnering. But surprisingly to us a little bit, since we're still quite a young company in terms of stage of development, there is an awful lot of interest in what we're doing because it's so different. And because it has so much potential, if we're correct, this is unlike anything else.
And I'm sure since it is a small molecule, the cost and the accessibility for people to receive this treatment will be better. So I think that's one huge advantage there too.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Frank, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to us and share a little bit about the company and progress you've made so far in the last 10 years. Really significant work. and we'll be looking forward to updates in clinical trials and all things like
Okay.
that. Is there anything else you want to share with the audience before we sign off here?
Well, thank you, Ray. I really appreciate the chance to speak to you and your audience, and I hope they found this interesting, and they kind of cheer for us a little bit. So thanks so much.
Awesome.